Welcome to the assembly video of the Co-Cycles Buzzraw X250 and X750. If you encounter any problems during the build, please feel free to drop us an email or consult a professional bicycle mechanic in your area for a helping hand. This is a list of tools required for the assembly process. This particular combination of rim and tire can be a little tricky to install. Patience is key at this point. The procedure we're about to show you works the best for us. However, if you have your own method that you are comfortable with, feel free to install the tires your way. For correct orientation of the hot patches on the V Apache tires, you will want the Coast hot patch to be on the drive side of the rear wheel, and the Cycles hot patch to be on the drive side of the front wheel. If your bike comes with V-Mission skinwall tires, follow the rotation direction embossed on the tire sidewall. Start by placing the rim in between the tire beads. Work one bead over the rim. This is where the fit gets a little bit tight. Be patient and take your time at this step. Inflate the inner tube slightly to give it some shape. Do not overinflate it at this point, as it may make it more difficult for you in the next step. Insert the shredder valve into the valve hole of the rim, and push the rest of the tube into the tire. Work the second bead onto the rim. Once again, take your time and mind you do not pinch the tube with the tire levers or in between the rim and the tire bead. Inflate the tires to a minimum of 10 psi or up to a maximum of 20 psi. Insert the quick release skewer into the front hub from the drive side. Note the orientation of the skewer springs. The tapered end of the spring faces the hub. Using a 6mm hex wrench and a 13mm socket, remove the M8 bolts and nuts from the steerer pivot clamps. Please take note of the fork clamp orientation. The mounting point on the bottom clamp faces the rear of the bike, and the mounting point of the top clamp faces the front. Line up the bearings of the upper linkage with the upper clamp mounting points, and insert the M8 bolt from the drive side of the clamp. Do the same for the bottom linkage. Using a 6mm hex wrench, thread the bolts in and tighten to 8 Nm. Thread the M8 nuts onto the end of the bolts. Tighten the nut to 8 Nm with a 13mm socket. Prevent the M8 bolt from turning by using a 6mm hex wrench for support. Using a 3mm hex wrench, loosen the screws on the display mount holder by several turns to allow it to pivot freely. Remove the stem faceplate with a 6mm hex wrench. Place the handlebar in the stem and loosely attach the faceplate so as to hold the handlebar in place. Adjust the tilt of the handlebar to your preferred angle, or perpendicular to the ground if you do not have a preference. Ensure the clamp spacing is even on both sides of the faceplate. Tighten the stem faceplate evenly and in a cross pattern to 7 Nm. Loosen the front brake caliper pinch bolt with a size 5 hex wrench. Loosen the rear brake caliper pinch bolt and remove the brake caliper completely. This will make it easier to install the rear wheel later on. To install the brake cable into the brake levers, align the slot in the barrel adjuster with the slot in the brake lever and install the cable as shown. Run the large harness wire in between the crossbar of the handlebar and the faceplate of the stem, and into the steerer tube. Run the wire along the down tube and through the split in the bottom of the frame. Remove its protective cover. Remove the protective cover from the torque sensor. This is the wire coming from the bottom bracket of the bicycle. Remove the two M6 nuts and washers from the controller cradle assembly. Plug the harness connector into the matching end from the controller. Line up the arrows and push the plug together until the connection is secure. Do the same for the torque sensor wire. This is the smallest of the three connectors coming from the controller unit. Run the connector for the rear wheel through the split in the back of the frame. While lowering the controller cradle assembly onto the frame, line up the M6 bolts with the corresponding bolt holes. Ensure that no wires are trapped between the frame and the battery mount cover. Reinstall the M6 washers and nuts using a size 5 hex wrench and a size 10 spanner. Tighten the bolts to 5 Newton meters. Route the brake cut sensor wires between the faceplate of the stem and the display holder. Remove the protective covers from the 3 remaining plugs on the harness. We will be using these 2 plugs. Plug the brake cut sensor into the harness. Line up the arrows and ensure the plugs are secure. You can replace the protective cover on the 3rd plug. We will not be using it during this install. Using a 3mm hex wrench, remove the 2 screws on the bottom of the display. Mount the display onto the display mount and tighten to 1 Newton meter. Tighten the display mount holder with the 3mm hex wrench, just enough so it no longer moves. Remove the axle nuts and chain tensioners from the axle of the rear wheel. The front of the axle can be determined by the slot that has been cut into the drive side. This slot faces the front of the bicycle. On the drive side axle, there should be 1 washer installed before the no-turn washer. On the non-drive side of the rear wheel, the no-turn washer will be installed with the tab facing outwards and to the front. Place the belt over the free hub of the wheel and slide the wheel into the dropouts. Again, ensure the tab of the no-turn washer faces outwards and to the front. Install the chain tensioners followed by the washer and the axle nut. With the belt on the chainring and sprocket, use the provided chain tensioner to tension the belt according to the manufacturer's recommendations. A link to the Gates instruction manual on proper belt installation will be provided in the description below. Once the belt has been tensioned and the wheels centered, tighten the axle nuts to 25 Newton meters. Plug the rear wheel's power cord into the controller unit. To install the front wheel, line up the brake rotor with the brake caliper and slide the wheel into the dropouts. Close the quick release skewer. To ensure that the quick release has been closed with sufficient clamping force, the quick release lever should leave an imprint on your palm. Do note that riding the bike with an improperly secured quick release skewer can lead to severe injury and even death. Please ensure your quick release has been properly secured. Slightly loosen the IS mounting bolts on the rear brake adapter to allow it to pivot freely. Reinstall the rear brake caliper. Route the brake housing on the inside of the rear triangle and into the brake caliper. The brake cable should be routed through the anchor bolt as shown. Tighten it to 7 Newton meters. The IS mounts on the rear brake are slotted to allow some rotation of the caliper. As the rear wheel is pulled back in the dropouts, the top of the rotor will come into contact with the brake caliper. You will need to rotate the caliper slightly to prevent this rotor and caliper contact. Tighten the IS mounts to 7 Newton meters. Align the brake caliper with the rotor and tighten the post mount bolts to 7 Newton meters. Give the brake lever about 10 good hard squeezes. This will allow the housing ferrules to sit properly on the ends of the housing. Adjust the cable tension if necessary. Adjust the front brake in the same manner. Do note the IS mount on the front brake does not have the pivot function. Tighten all the bolts to 7 Newton meters. Finish off with the cable end caps to prevent the cable from fraying. Cable tie the loose cables and tuck away any excess into the battery plate cover. Lightly grease the threads of the pedals. Install the right pedal in a clockwise direction and the left pedal in an anti-clockwise direction. Tighten the pedals with a pedal wrench. Loosen the grub screw on the rear of the kickstand with a 2.5mm hex wrench and extend it to the appropriate length. It is not necessary to remove the grub screw completely. Tighten the grub screw to 1.5 Nm. Using a 6mm hex wrench, align and tighten the stem to 9 Nm. As your safety is our #1 priority, it is of the utmost importance that the bicycle is assembled correctly. If at any moment during the assembly you find you are unsure of how to proceed, we recommend you visit your local bicycle store and have a professional mechanic assist you. This brings us to the conclusion of the Buzzraw X assembly video. Now get out there and go ride your bike.